So I was making sure that we had safeties covered. Like I was making sure, like, okay, I needed to put the Thursday podcast. Who do I want to do safeties? Steve, I think you and I may have been talking about this Thursday safety podcast since August. So
Yeah.
we're at the end of the part where we've evaluated the safeties in the draft class. Taylor, how has the let's say the last 4 or 5 weeks of evaluating safeties, like how would you summarize what you saw or didn't see?
Yeah, I mean, I still think I have some players that I need to get to. And like I think it's a pretty deep class. Like I think we talk about like 17 or 18 of them getting drafted, and I could easily see 20, 22 maybe getting drafted in this cycle. I know it's a position that's not really highly valued, like we've talked about with Caleb Downs, but I really do think there's a lot of really good safeties in this class. And there's a lot that will be, contributors on, whether it's round 3, 4, 5, like those middle rounds, those safeties are going to be pretty solid players, I think, at the next level.
Steve, how about you? How would you summarize the last 5 weeks of watching safeties?
Yeah, I think it's just part of the process of evaluation and reevaluation, whether it's coming out of the 2024 season or summer scouting. You have your names and your guys, a lot of people like Dom, who does Monday nights here, always picks on me about Bud Clark. I always told him, doesn't mean he's going to be, at the top of my board when all is said and done. But yeah, it's a process, and, you don't make one game, carry too much weight over a body of work. And, I think injuries play a part. Use it as a segue, talking about two guys that I do like, Rod Moore and Terry Moore. But, for right now, I'll readjust my board once I start seeing some. I mean, Rod Moore came back, but, I want to see some medicals, before I put Terry in there. I know Taylor's got him in there, but yeah. But it's an ever-evolving process, right?
Okay, so we are having a board reveal right now. Taylor and Steve each submitted the boards to the private chat. I know maybe 2 to 5 minutes before the podcast, we began to put the boards side by side, and we've had a couple of brief conversations. Taylor's board is on the left. Steve's board is on the right. I'm going to read Taylor's board for the users on Spotify. And both Steve and Taylor have 15 players that they've ranked that we're going to discuss. So Taylor's board: Caleb Downs, Dylan Thieneman, Kamari Ramsey, Jalen Kilgore, AJ Halsey, Michael Taft, Jalen Husky, Terry Moore, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, Bray Hubbard, Genesis Smith, Keon Sabb, VJ Payne, Zakee Wheatley, Robert Spears Jennings. Steve's board: Caleb Downs, Dylan Thieneman, Kamari Ramsey. You should notice a trend. Those top 3 are the same. Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, Jalen Husky, Zakee Wheatley, AJ Halsey, Michael Taft, Jalen Kilgore. That's the top 9. You should notice some similarities. It's the same names with one exception on both boards. Bud Clark, Bishop Fitzgerald, Genesis Smith, Lewis Moore, Keon Sabb, Devin Neal. So those are, I didn't count the number of names, but I think there's probably about 28 names. Not 28. I think there's probably about 20 to 25 different names, because the guys you have day 3 grades on are very different, kind of thing. So Taylor, why don't you take a few minutes and give a very brief summary of every player that's in your top 15?
Yeah. Okay. I got you. We'll start with Caleb Downs. I think this is someone that we've talked about for months and months and months. Everyone thinks he's the top safety in the class. For me, actually, he's the highest graded safety since at least COVID for me. He has a near perfect score in my ranking model so far. It factors in like relative athletic score and some things down the line. So we'll get to those when the draft, when the combine happens. But he is right now 3 points higher than any other safety in my class, in the whole class for me on my board. So 6 foot 205. I have him graded as a top 10 player in the class, and I stand by that. For right now, we'll go to Dylan Thieneman out of Oregon. He's also 6 foot 205. Apparently, that's a pretty common listing amongst safeties. A lot of these guys are listed at 6 foot 205. Dylan Thieneman I think he's a rangy deep safety. He's got good athleticism, good open field tackler, someone that's going to be really exciting to watch. And I think he's going to thrive against that JMU team in the first round of the playoff. For me, the third player on my board is Kamari Ramsey out of USC. You guessed it, 6 foot 205 pounds. He is someone that plays in the slot right now due to so many injuries that they've had this year. Obviously, USC not going to the playoff, but he's number 7 on USC. He shows up on tape. For me, my fourth ranked safety, I actually graded him as a safety and a corner, and he actually graded out higher in my safety rankings, and that's Jalen Kilgore from South Carolina. He plays primarily in the slot as well. But he's a big body, 6'1", 211 pounds, really physical player, but also has the ability to play one-on-one. Has guarded Ryan Williams in some nice reps and made some nice PPUs against really talented wide receivers. Number 5 for me is AJ Halsey from LSU, another big physical player, 6 foot 222 pounds. I think he's really, really strong in the run game, and I think he can be a good defender on the back end. Number 6 for me, and I always forget how to pronounce his name. Is it Michael Taff?
That's how I pronounced it.
Okay, perfect. 6 foot 189. Another aggressive, fast safety, really good coming downhill. I think a little bit, sometimes he gets a little bit too out of control coming downhill, but a really good player in that Texas defense. And I believe former walk-on, correct?
Yep.
Yep. Wears number 16 because of his friend. Really good story there if you want to look into that as well. Number 7 safety for me, Jalen Husky out of Maryland. He was one of my favorite safeties. Kind of unexpected guy I wasn't expecting to have in my top 10. Even Steve has him higher than I do, but I just think he's rarely out of position. One of those guys that's doing his job on almost every single play. And I think he has really, really good ball skills when he's targeted downfield. He's a little bit taller, 6'2", 201 pounds. So he's got a little bit of length on him. For me, my 8th ranked safety is Terry Moore out of Duke, 6'1", 200 pounds. Unfortunately, as Steve alluded to earlier, he missed the entire 2025 season due to a torn ACL. I think he's about 11 months removed from that now. So it'll be interesting to see if he declares for the draft. I haven't heard his name quite yet. As Steve mentioned, Rod Moore will be going back. He missed pretty much the last 2 seasons with injury at Michigan. But Terry Moore, good athleticism, really good player, another guy who does his 111th, and he's able to play man coverage versus KC Concepcion, at least in last year's tape. And I thought that was really encouraging because he's one of the best receivers in this year's class. For me, my safety number 9, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, another big physical body, 6'2", 202 pounds. I think he really could be the first non-power 4 player drafted. So that's exciting to see. He's a good player. And then we're going to get into the Alabama safety. Bray Hubbard is my 10th ranked player, 6'2", 213 pounds. So a little bit bigger physical player. He's more of a box safety, but really, really talented player nonetheless. Genesis Smith, same thing with him. He's another bigger safety at 6'2", and he's more of a downhill run stopping defender. He from Arizona. And then Keon Sabb is someone that I actually graded in summer scouting, actually 12 and 13 here. VJ Payne at 13. Both these guys I graded in summer scouting. Some things I wanted to see from both of them. Keon Sabb has moved up in the rankings for me. VJ Payne actually has moved down based on their 2025 tape. Keon Sabb's more of a deep safety, plays in the back end, whereas VJ Payne is a very large. Well, he's tall. He's 6'3". He's only listed at like maybe 190, 195. So he needs to put on a little bit of weight in the bottom half, but really physical player. And then Zakee Wheatley, who I just watched today. So he snuck in the rankings. I got some film on him. I thought he looked really good. 6'2", 200. I think he's 201 pounds listed, something like that. So another big safety from Penn State. And you're seeing a lot of the big safeties for me have kind of, went in this kind of 10 to 15 range. The guys that are like 6'2", a little bit more physical players. I like the cover guys a little bit more. And then coming in at 15 is Robert Spears Jennings. And he is a player that graded really highly for me in the film. Some of the analytics that I meshed my rankings with don't like Robert Spears-Jennings quite as much, but I liked him on film. I thought he was a really physical player, and I graded him highly for that.
So Taylor, that was really well done. I liked how, okay, give a summary, and you went through that with a great efficiency, and I liked how you explained each player. So Steve, as you look at Taylor's board, if you have to pick one player that, let's say, sticks out at you or surprised you, where is it on Taylor's board?
I don't know if surprise is the word. As you alluded to at the start of the show, there is a lot of similarity, in the names. It's really just the order. Cha is higher on Bray Hubbard than I am. I get, like I said, surprise is a hard word. I actually give you a lot of credit and props for sticking to your guns on Terry Moore. It's a guy, ever since you and I have been doing this, Cha, we both talked, highly about him. I just, I contradict myself a little bit because I still have, Jermod McCoy as my number 3 corner, despite him being in a similar situation that we haven't seen him. So maybe I'm not being fair to Terry Moore by leaving him off my board right now. But, I didn't see Terry Moore as a first-round talent the way I see McCoy, in the other defensive back position.
Yeah.
So, surprise might be a strong word, but I guess I'll single out Terry Moore. One thing, and everybody has an opinion, and it's valid, and I love the back and forth that all the draft professors do, especially, Cha and I being partners on this thing, 7:00 Thursday nights, is just the variance where people are on Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. There are some guys that have him as certainly not their 1, but maybe their 2. He was not a guy that I was focused on in the summer, coming out of Toledo, and he's been, a pretty consistent riser. So the variance on a name like that, I find interesting.
Well, and we'll get into the grades, Steve, after, because I'm curious, like where the day 2, day 3 cutoff is for each of you. But Steve, do you want to do a quick breakdown of the 15 safeties on your board?
Yeah. So, really not much I can add on some of the names we already covered. Obviously, our top 3 are similar. I mean, Caleb Downs, spent the freshman year at Alabama, moved over to the Buckeyes. I won't repeat the measurables, but, Taylor hit the nail on the head, consensus number 1 for a few years now. His versatility, his processing is top notch. I want to be careful with words like generational and elite because they get, oftentimes overused. Number 2, we have the same with Dylan Thieneman of Oregon. Yep, we know the measurables, very good, rangy free safety. I wouldn't call him a ball hawk, but he's strong both in the run as well as in coverage. Number 3 for me, Kamari Ramsey of USC. I would say he has probably the safest floor of the guys in my top 10, top 15. He does not miss tackles. He has been so strong in that makes him tier 1. Then brought him up before, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren of Toledo, small school. I won't call him elite, maybe a superstar, but in terms of my grading, he's one of the top graded safeties I've got. There's components of his game, his physicality against the run. He's fluid. He's rangy as an athlete. He's got the great size at 6'3". I think that makes him, next to VJ Payne, probably the biggest one. Yeah, I have him at 6'2", 6'3". So we'll see what happens come the combine. So he's at number 4. Jalen Husky was another guy that I was stuck on for a while. And we were doing our show, about a month or so ago, and really, started watching more current tape and went back and really feel he's been a bright spot of that, the Maryland team, let alone the defense. But he doesn't allow a lot of yards, and he does have lockdown potential. At number 6, Taylor wasn't on this show with us when we covered him, Jim, but that's Zakee Wheatley of Penn State. He was a guy that you and I talked about for the Bills, although my New York Jets need safety help pretty badly. That's for sure. But, tackling needs to be a little better, but he doesn't allow a lot of yardage. He's very good in coverage. Then moving on to number 7, AJ Halsey of LSU. Was a guy that I also like. My thing with AJ Halsey is when I watch tape and I look at the contributors on that defense. One thing I noticed when you got guys like Harold Perkins in the linebacker role, who's very vocal. Halsey was back there doing a lot of talking, and I don't mean trash talking, but a lot of communicating. I really felt, whereas Perkins does a great job at the front end of that defense, Halsey was really good on the back end. And hey, can't be too bad. He's dating Lane Kiffin's daughter, right? His new coach. I wonder if that'll be allowed now. He's a playmaker. His missed tackle percentage is a little higher than I would like, but strong player. Then Michael Taft of Texas at number 8 for me. Taylor, you mentioned it, walk-on story, good instincts, very good production against top, competition in that SEC. I'll make the argument that the Big Ten is more impressive. We'll have that conversation another day. And number 9, Jalen Kilgore of the Gamecocks in South Carolina. Very versatile player. A lot of room for improvement. Has allowed this past season more yards than I would like, but I'm going based on the career. And then number 10, how could I leave him out of my top 10, is he is a guy, even though I rank him at number 10, I really believe that in the NFL, Bud Clark is going to be quite the story. I'll use the word sleeper. He has been targeted quite a bit, so there's elements of his game that he needs to clean up. He did allow 4 touchdowns this year, but I just like the traits. And that's where I have it. Number 10, number 11, Bishop Fitzgerald of NC State, one of the smaller guys that I have him down at 5'11". A lot of variance to his game. There's moments of really strong coverage, decent tackling, and then there are times where it falls apart. Number 12 out of Arizona, Genesis Smith. He's your dependable guy, right? He may not be a perennial Pro Bowler, but he's not going to be a practice squad guy. That's for sure. He's going to be a contributor. Can't wait to see guys like him start their careers on special teams. Big guy too. It's 6'2", I think. Then out of Indiana, number 13, Lewis Moore. As I got more into watching Indiana, because in case y'all didn't know, the Jets need a quarterback, and a lot of buzz around Fernando Mendoza, and you start watching these other guys like Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper. You watch pieces on the O-line, and then certainly the linebacker Aiden Fisher is an interesting prospect. I'm pretty high on him. And then you start watching the secondary. So hang on, give me 1 second on him. Yeah, another dependable guy, solid veteran. At number 14, Keon Sabb of Alabama. Transfer talent, does not allow a lot of yards, does not allow a lot of touchdowns. Dependable back piece there for the Crimson Tide. And then lastly was a guy that we sort of decided to cover at the last minute, whether it was 3 or 4 weeks ago now, is Devin Neal of Louisville. Also, not one of the bigger guys on the board at 5'11", but tape don't lie. He doesn't miss tackles either. Very dependable there. He may be one of the better tacklers in this class, certainly on my board. He probably comes in on that piece second to Kamari Ramsey of USC, but he's got very strong lockdown coverage ability. And so that's where we are.
So you said Devin Neal from Louisville. I have Virginia. Do I have the wrong school listed?
Oh, I may not have copied and pasted correctly.
Okay, I'm verifying. Yeah. I'm verifying the safety.
Yeah. After a while, the spreadsheet columns start, blending in. Yeah, but let's see. Yeah, for some reason now I'm not pulling it up.
Yeah, I have Devin Neal I watched him from Virginia. If it's Devin Neal,
okay, it is Virginia. Yep. Yeah, because when I'm pulling it up, I'm getting
safety on PFF. So yeah,
is he really?
Yep.
Yeah. Sorry about that, but yes, Virginia.
Well, and again, I'm just checking math, and that's part of what a moderator does.
Thank you.
Okay, so Taylor, as you look at Steve's board, what is, let's say, the initial comment or the biggest surprise to you?
Okay, well, first off, I'll say Devin Neal transferred from Louisville to Virginia, so that's probably the mix-up.
That's what it was.
From Steve's board, I think, honestly, I have Devin Neal as an undrafted free agent. So he was probably one of my lowest graded safeties. So to see him in the top 15, now I only graded like 23 safeties, so he's like towards the 20s for me. But he's just someone that I thought, was maybe just a little bit undersized, I guess, for the position. And I know his physicality was something that I graded him on the highest, and I know Steve talked about his tackling. But I still think at the end of the day, he's one of those guys that I think he might get drafted on day 3. But I think he maybe is one of those guys that kind of, ticks down a little bit, because like you see the bottom 6 guys on my list, 6'2", 6'2", 6'1", 6'3", 6'2", 6. So I'm thinking that some of these bigger guys that can play special teams, that can move around in the slot, that can, be in the box, that can move and do some different things. I think some of those guys might have a little bit better path to playing time and more success than a guy like Devin Neal. So I think that stands out. Lewis Moore's not a guy that I've gotten to, and I hate to tell Steve this, but Bud Clark is ranked 16th on my board. So I actually did rank 21, I think, safeties on the draft.
So you're saying there's a chance.
It breaks it down into 50. So I think 15 is the most you get on the image. So, I think those are probably the ones that stand out to me. Obviously, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren at 4 versus 9. I would say that's typically, or that would be something that stood out to me. But on my rankings, I think, from my 4th ranked safety to my 9th ranked safety, so Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, those guys are all within 0.7 of each other on my rankings. So those guys are all really, really close, and they're all graded day 3 for me. So I know we talked
about day 3.
Round 3. Excuse me. Sorry.
Got it. I was pretty sure I knew what you meant.
Yep, you knew what I meant. Round 3. So all of those guys from my list of my safety 4 is Jalen Kilgore, AJ Halsey's 5, Michael Taft, Jalen Husky, Terry Moore, and Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. All of those guys are almost said it again. Round 3 graded for me. So they're all really, really, really close. So, I can't really say, if you have Emmanuel McNeil-Warren at 4 and I have him at 9, well, my 4th ranked guy is barely ahead of my 9th ranked guy. So I'm kind of with you on that. I think for me, Bishop Fitzgerald was someone I did not have in my top 5 either, but he was just outside. He's like 18 for me. So he's actually, it's really interesting because I put together this production model that takes into account some different analytics as well as their stats on the field. So I determined it as defensive playmaker and just how much are they making plays, tackles, interceptions, like making plays around the ball. And Bishop Fitzgerald graded out 3rd amongst all safeties. It was Caleb Downs was 1, AJ Halsey was 2, and Bishop Fitzgerald was 3 for me. But when I watched his film, he was the guy that I gave the lowest film grade to. I think Steve kind of mentioned it, just with the inconsistent tackling, inconsistent coverage. I think a little bit more consistency, and I could easily see him rising up the board, especially if he tests as well. I know he's under 6 foot, so he's a little bit, smaller on the safety side, but
he's also an older prospect. He's one of the
it,
older ones. Yeah.
It's just interesting to me that a guy like that is the, for my production model that I built, he's third, but when I watch the tape and I kind of fuse those two together, he drops outside the top 15 for me. So, those are probably the ones that those are, I think, the only guys that we kind of had, relatively far apart.
Okay. And Taylor, again, your board's on the left. You said your top 9 safeties are in your top 100.
Correct. Yep.
Steve, where is the top 100 cutoff for you with safeties?
For me, that would be guess what? My top 9.
Okay, so Bud Clark for you is an early day 3?
Yep.
Got it. Okay. So, I guess another reasonable question to ask is, Steve, how many I think we evaluated 33 or 34 safeties in the podcast. How many have a draftable grade for you?
Well, we've listed 15. I've actually got draftable grades on 21.
Got it. And Taylor,
I'm at 21 as well.
Okay. So, and that would just be like, if 21 safeties get drafted, that's a tad over the average. The average fluctuates between 17 and 20 safeties a draft. So if 21 get drafted, that's like 20. What that would actually be a 25% increase.
Yeah,
right.
We talked about it a little bit too. It's just a deep safety class. Like there's a lot of different flavors. Like I talked about the big kind of box safeties, but there's good safeties in the back end as well. Guys that can play in the slot. Like some teams might not even have Jalen Kilgore on their board as a safety, right? He might be drafted as a cornerback, and that's totally fine because he can play cornerback and he does play in the slot. So you can really move some of these guys around. And I think it makes it so interesting for teams on day 3. Well, do I want to take a guy that can only play, deep safety, or do I want to take a guy that can play in the slot, play down in the box, move around? And if they're kind of, similar in terms of how they're graded, I think a team would lean more towards the guy that's a little bit more versatile. So I think that's going to open up the door for, maybe hitting that, above average, safeties drafted, because there are guys like that, on day 3.
Yeah. And that's actually why, I'm still working on where I would like him to be, but that was my feeling on Keontae Scott, and where to place him, and, looking at, Kilgore and whatnot, I decided to go with that, and he's further down for me, Scott, but yep.
And then I know Steve was asking me like where Keontae Scott of Miami is in Draft Professor as a corner, right? And Taylor, we did the slot episode last week, EJ, where we were discussing Jalen Kilgore on the same podcast as Keontae Scott, on the same podcast as Preston Hodge. They all play the same position, but Jalen Kilgore and Preston Hodge don't play slot the same way, but they're both going to be a slot defender as one of the possibilities for them at the NFL level. So, Taylor, who would be your top 3 players if you wanted to put somebody in the box?
I would want to put Jalen Kilgore. I want to put Jalen Kilgore around the ball. I don't really care where that's at in the slot. I only gave like my max point for like upgrade, my max rating or whatever, my projection for who's the most, has the most upside of this whole entire safety group. I gave Caleb Downs and Jalen Kilgore both max grades for upside. Like I think he can really, really transcend and be an elite slot player in the NFL. So I would want him down around the line of scrimmage, whether that's in the slot or whether it's in the box. I'd take your pick. I think another guy, just based on these rankings, I want Emmanuel McNeil-Warren down near the box, and I really like what Bray Hubbard can do as well. So I'm just going to go by my rankings, and those are the guys that I would say closest to the box. I think even AJ Halsey, despite being a little bit bigger at 6 foot 222, he still plays in the back end quite a bit. Kamari Ramsey, I want to see in the slot. If that's a little bit in the box, that's all right. But I think Downs, Thieneman, like those guys will kind of start in the back end. Taft, same thing. So yeah, I'll go Kilgore, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, and Bray Hubbard.
Okay. And Steve, same question. If you have to pick 3 box like safeties, you want to move down into the box, get them closer to the ball, who would they be?
Yeah, so probably one would be EMW, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. He's already done a lot of snaps in the box for Toledo. The dude loves contact. He's, got a good downhill trigger. He strikes physically, got good short area burst. So he fits the run fit pressure. So he would be number one. I would actually like to see Bud Clark in the box because of, his fluidity as an athlete. He is comfortable in traffic. He does good in terms of play recognition, especially in underneath zones. He's not a pure thumper, but he's versatile and he is smart enough to handle those box, pattern match rules. Kilgore for sure would probably be my number 3. A guy who could survive deep, but he really does come alive around the ball. He's got an aggressive temper, I will use the words, and he's a willing tackler, and he's got enough thickness in his build to hold up against, the run in the NFL. Just trying to think. Yeah, Taff is another one that I think about, but those would be, certainly my top 3.
Okay. And then I guess, again, safeties can also play in the slot. So if you had to pick, Steve, your 3 best slot players in the entire draft class. So even if they weren't listed as a safety to discuss in this podcast, who are the 3 best players if a team needs a slot defender?
Out of the guys I ranked, I would probably, again, I got that versatility of Jalen Kilgore. He would be in there. I would like to see, we talked a little about him and, we're not covering him because he's not in my top 15, but Keontae Scott, I would say, because of that hybrid, he really does. He's got legit nickel chops. He's got good mirror ability, fluid hips. He could certainly blitz off the edge. Where wouldn't you put Caleb Downs, right? He's probably overqualified just for the slot, but, of course he could play there. So I'm going to go Keontae Scott, Caleb Downs, and my third choice, I'm going to go with Kamari Ramsey because I just like how he's so much of a smooth mover. He's comfortable in man versus a tight end or a slot receiver, good for in match, with quarter concepts. He's got good feel for spacing and the different route combos. So for me, like I said, even though, he's not in my top 15, I'd probably say Keontae Scott, Caleb Downs, and Kamari Ramsey.
Okay, and Taylor, for you, same question. If you had to pick 3 players in the draft, whether they're a safety or not, because a team has a need at the slot position on defense.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with my number 1, and if you watched last week's episode, you heard it. And that's D'Angelo Pons. I know people think that he can play outside, and that's fine. He might be an outside corner, and he can play on the boundary, and that's fine. Put him in the slot, and that dude is going to wreak havoc. I am a huge fan of D'Angelo Pons. He has a first-round grade for me, and I would put him in the slot in a heartbeat. Another player that is a corner that does play in the slot a little bit, but I think he can play outside too. I had Chandler Rivers out of Duke. He would be another one that I would want to see in the slot if my team is building it. And I know I have Ramsey ranked higher than Kilgore, but Ramsey's playing in the slot because of injury. He is a safety by nature. He's been a safety for years. So he's playing in the slot because of injury. He's been great in the slot, and that's fine. That gives him more versatility, I think, which is why I have him ranked a little bit higher than Kilgore. But I would still want to see Kilgore in the slot. I just love what he can do from a size, speed, coverage standpoint, tackling standpoint. So those would be my three. Pons, or D'Angelo Pons, Chandler Rivers, and Jalen Kilgore.
Okay, so Brandon has a question. I guess it's a comment. I'm going to turn it into a question. If you had to pick a safety that would comp to Kirby Joseph or Brian Branch in this draft class, Taylor, who are you thinking? I think I know what the answer is, but I'm going to let you take the question.
That's a great question. For Brian Branch, yeah, I'm gonna need a second to think on that one. What do you think, Jim? Who come ahead?
I was thinking, I'm thinking it's Kilgore.
Okay.
Right, because and the way I would say it, okay, so Brian Branch, is he a linebacker? Is he a slot defender? Is he a safety? And the short answer is yes. And that's why I picked Kilgore. Right? Because is Kilgore a small linebacker? Is he playing safety or is he playing corner? And and Taylor, I think you did a good job of kind of propping Jalen Kilgore up. I mean, he's your fourth ranked safety.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason that you want a player graded that high, and that should give you an indication as to how good this safety class is. Because if memory serves me correctly, Brian Branch was either the first or the second safety taken in his draft class. And he went at, I believe, the top of round 2 to Detroit.
Yeah, he went 46th overall.
Yeah.
So Brian Branch going, in the late 30s in the draft, and Jalen Kilgore has on Taylor's board 3 safeties that are graded higher than that.
I think Kilgore is a good comp for Brian Branch. Like, he does primarily play in the slot and down in the box, and that's what Kilgore can do. He can move around, he can do both, and I think that's really valuable. So again, that's why I have him ranked a little bit higher than some of these other guys. So I think it's a good comp, or a good person in this year's class that can kind of play in that Brian Branch style mold.
Steve, did you have any different thoughts on a Brian Branch or Kirby Joseph comp?
I agree on the Kilgore. I'm going to throw out a name that we're not talking about tonight, but, go back and watch the show we did. I think it was either, I don't remember the Thursday dates in November anymore, but it may have been the first Thursday in November or the second. And I'm going to throw out Earl Little Jr. Into the mix from what I remember, because, he really is that star nickel safety hybrid. He's not a box stumper or a pure post guy. He's got cornerback movement skills, which, he's got the eyes of a safety. So, changing tonight's program up a little, I do agree on Kilgore, but Brandon, go take a look at Earl Little Jr.
Yeah, and if memory serves me correctly, Earl Little Jr. is Florida State, and I think he has another year left.
I think he does as well. I actually didn't grade him because he's a true junior, I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
But Owen also covered him a few weeks before, and Owen was like, yeah, there's something to him, to the point that Steve was saying. So Earl Little Jr. can be used a lot of different ways. And I think we're going to begin to see more players like this in the draft come out higher. The NFL needs players like A.J. Halsey, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, and Jalen Kilgore.
Yeah. I mean, we saw it last year with Jacob Parrish and Upton Stout. Now they're on the smaller side of slot corners, but those two are in the top 10 of slot snaps in the NFL. like 5'10", 180, 190, but they're just energizer bunnies. Like they're going to be around the football. So I think that's interesting that those types of players were vaulted into the third round in last year's draft, and they're performing at a high level. I think we talked about it on the slot show last week, and it's those types of players that are undersized maybe, but just, physical and just are almost psychos out there, right? And it's like this year's class, and that's why I've said it, is like D'Angelo Pons, Chandler Rivers, like those guys that are going to be graded as corners. I think great. They're great corners, and they primarily play on the corner right now. They don't really play in the slot, but their size, like Jacob Parrish, didn't really primarily play in the slot in college. Like those guys were typically the best corners on their team. Like I talked about, like Jaquan McMillan, who's one of the best slot corners in the NFL right now. He was at East Carolina. He just played outside corner because he was the best corner on East Carolina, right? Came to the NFL, undersized, physical player. Still, now he's dominating, right, in the slot. So I think Pons and Rivers are two guys I would look to move into the slot in the NFL. I know that's a corner conversation, but as far as the safeties go, to answer the question about Brian Branch versus Kirby Joseph, like it's almost, you can almost look at Alabama's safeties and be like, they kind of have it. Like Keon Stab would be the guy that I would compare to Kirby Joseph. And then you have Bray Hubbard on there. He plays a little bit more down in the box than the slot. Like Brian Branch is able to cover players in the slot a little bit better than Bray Hubbard. But Bray Hubbard's a physical player that plays down near the line of scrimmage. So similar, just in the Alabama secondary alone, you have almost the same setup as the Lions. So it's very interesting.
Well, and another thing, I mean, look, it also matters greatly where, to who they're getting drafted and the scheme, right? So Brandon had brought up the Texans. So that's D'Amico Ryans. He spent time under Robert Saleh, who is very big on converting safeties to linebackers. He did now under Aaron Glenn's scheme, it's not looking as good, but, there was some success with Jamie Sherwood in that role. So, depending what, D'Amico Ryans and Matt Burke want to do, if I'm looking at, a curve, we did the Brian Branch thing. If I'm going to look at the Kirby Joseph thing, one that comes to mind for me right now is Zakee Wheatley, right? The length, the frame, the ball skills, the range, he's able to see it from, high and drive downhill, the run support, profile. He's the one that I'd probably lead with. And then he's one of the 21 I have ranked. We didn't mention him, but I'm thinking about Xavier Nwankpa, right? He's got that plus size and range. He's comfortable and deep and split field looks, and he's very physical. So, I think it all just depends on the scheme.
Yeah, so let's talk about scheme for a second. So, Taylor, I know that you're a Broncos fan. You play the Chargers twice a year. You've seen Derwin James for more than a decade.
Yeah.
Which safety on this board would replace Derwin James?
I'm just looking at my board. That's such a great question. Hold on, give me a second to pull.
I've got a couple more of these teed up. So we're not done.
Oh boy, I love it.
Yeah,
I love it. I've
got a few of these.
Honestly, it's gonna sound kind of crazy. Maybe not. It won't sound too crazy, but I honestly think from my list, like just going down the list, I think you're looking at a guy like either, and they're ranked right next to each other for me. And it's kind of that same tier, but that Emmanuel McNeil-Warren or Bray Hubbard, like those guys that play down in the box, like those big physical 6'2", 215-pound guys that just want to come down and hit you. And like that's, Derwin James loves that. So those would be probably the two guys on my board, just the two highest ranked guys that I see kind of filling that same role, because he's always down near the line of scrimmage, almost like another linebacker, right? And he's able to cover bigger tight ends, like whether that's a Travis Kelce or a Brock Bowers or an Evan Ingram within the division. So I would start with someone that's a bigger body, 6'2", 210 plus. One of those guys can definitely, probably nobody's replacing Derwin James in this class, let's be honest, but Derwin James is getting older, so you're going to have to get a replacement of sorts. And those are two big safeties that play down in the box that I think could match that physicality.
Okay, and Steve.
Oh, let me chime in on the Derwin thing.
Oh, you want to try
Yeah.
Derwin James too? Okay, I was going to
Hey,
give you a different one.
Hey, my team's in the AFC. Why not? Right. I like the Emmanuel McNeil Warren, juice downhill thumper, loving, I mentioned before, loves the contact, the comfort in a box safety or a dime linebacker role. Derwin James is obviously much more versatile in coverage, but if you're looking, for the tone setter around the line of scrimmage who could still play some coverage, I think McNeil Warren fits the vibe. And I'm going to go again to a show we did earlier in November and throw out Jelani McDonald. He's got a big athletic hybrid body, true multi, positional potential. You could use him in the box. You could use him some deep. You could use him in overhang. You could use him in star. It's more projection at this point than polish because obviously he's not in my top 15. But he's a toolsy guy. All right, I'm ready.
I'm with. I want to add one more name to the Derwin James comp because he's a player that I haven't watched yet, and I saw him declare. I think he declared, and I saw someone post about him that was in the Draft Professors, and that's Deshaun Singleton, safety out of Nebraska, 6'3", 210 pounds, and like when I look at like where they're lining up in terms of like the box or slot, like he is someone that compares pretty favorably to Derwin James in that. He does about a third of each, right? Sometimes he's in the slot, sometimes he's back deep at free safety, sometimes he's in the box. So he's a player that can do all three of those things. Huge physical presence, and he played really well for Nebraska this year. So he's kind of an underrated guy that I don't think a lot of people are talking about, but I do want to shout out to whichever draft professor brought him into my attention on my timeline. So he's another big physical guy.
Yeah, there were definitely a couple of safeties that have Senior Bowl. They will be at the Senior Bowl that we haven't covered, and I think Singleton was one of them. So we'll be coming back. We will be covering every safety at the Senior Bowl a little bit closer to the game. Okay, so Steve, another safety that's getting up there in years is Harrison Smith, Minnesota Vikings. So if you had to pick a safety here that makes you think of Harrison Smith in Minnesota, anybody come to mind?
Give me a second here. Let's take a look at the board. Well, again, I'm thinking about Xavier Nwankpa, the size, the length. He's got enough range to play split field and some post. All right. Well, I'll throw another one out there, and maybe I'll second guess this, but just shooting off the hip because I love these questions when we haven't, had time to prepare. Is maybe Michael Taft of Texas, and Harrison Smith and Taft, both very high football, IQ guys, good communicators. They know spacing and leverage. Can align deep or in the box or over the slot. Obviously, physically they don't match up, but in terms of the alignment and the smarts, I'm going to go with Taft. Another guy that came to mind that I don't have ranked, and I forget which draft professor it is who doesn't. He's not a big fan of him. Is Cole Wisniewski. Box robber, deep, rotator. He is a big guy. So I'll throw Cole Wisniewski some props, and whichever of the draft professors didn't like him, well, there we go.
He's so.
Oh, sure. So and who did I bring up? I brought up Taft. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So one guy that Owen likes, one guy that Owen doesn't like. Go ahead.
Yeah, he's so interesting. Like that Harrison Smith to comp to Cole Wisniewski. I was out on Cole Wisniewski because of what kind of I've heard a little bit of draft professors, kind of UDFA. He made a play in that Big 12 championship game that I was like, all right, I better go do some research on Wisniewski. So he's on my next up list to look at. So I'm excited about him. For me, for Harrison Smith, I'm going to go Zakee Wheatley. Plays primarily in the deep part of the field, but can come down. And when he does come down, he comes down with some force. I also thought that when I ranked Zakee Wheatley and I looked at the film, I thought that his top end speed was a little bit lacking. Like I think he's going to be in the mid to high 4.5s. That's where Harrison Smith ran 27 years ago. And whenever, Harrison Smith ultimately retired, I mean, he's a very, very good player, but his top end speed's kind of not there, but he's still in the right spot. He's still coming down with, hitting people with force. And I think Zakee Wheatley is someone that kind of mimics that a little bit.
So, how do I want to say this? So I'm fascinated how teams handle a draft this deep on safety. And what I mean by that is I could identify at least 3 teams that need to come out of the draft with a starting safety, and that's Minnesota, Los Angeles, and Buffalo. Without any doubt, those 3 teams, if they're going to do it, they win.
The Jets,
and I'm sure the Jets
absolutely
need one too.
Yeah, 100%. Yep.
But meaning, like, if you're meaning that these are teams that are replacing a veteran in 2 cases, right? So this is the draft to go get a guy or 2 guys. But I'm curious if teams say, well, a lot of these guys are interchangeable. Whether we get Hubbard or Kilgore, we're okay. Or if we get Hubbard or Wongpa, we're okay. Or do they see we need to get Hubbard because Wongpa won't be ready to play, in 2027 as a starter, and 2026 as a starter, right? Like, I'm curious how much of that factors in where teams say, there's going to be guys there in rounds 5, 6, or 7.
I think for me, I think it's going to be an absolute race to get Caleb Downs. You're talking about teams that are picking within about 7 to the 15 range. I think that's where he's going to go. I think it's going to be, I don't know where that's going to shake out. There's still 4 weeks left in the season, so we have no idea what that's going to look like from a draft perspective. But the Jets, we talked about, they pick I think they're 7th right now-ish, if I remember the mock. The Commanders are right there. The Vikings are right there. You mentioned the Chargers. They're going to be a little bit.
The Bengals.
Yeah, the Bengals, another team.
Bengals and the Dolphins. Yep.
There are a bunch of teams in the top 15, really from 6 to 15, 6 to 20, that are going to need a safety. And at least from what I've seen so far, it is not close. It is Caleb Downs, and then it is a significant gap, and then it is the rest of the guys. And the rest of the guys are close. Don't get me wrong. The rest of the guys are right there close. Caleb Downs is in another tier. And I you guys are probably going to make fun of me because for months I've been saying, why would you draft a safety that high? All he's done is got better. All he's done is produced. All he's done is showed exactly why he should be a top 10 pick, and he very well could be. So it's a guy like Caleb Downs when it's almost like the quarterback class this year. If Dante Moore returns to school, Ty Simpson's likely to return. It is going to be a fight between the Browns, the Jets, and the Raiders for Fernando Mendoza, right? And all of those teams have draft capital to go up and get a quarterback like that. I think the same thing's happening with the safety class. Now, are the guys in round 2 and 3, are they serviceable and they're going to be really good players in the NFL? Absolutely. Can you say the same about the 2nd and 3rd and 4th and 5th ranked quarterback? Probably not. But in terms of the talent gap between number 1 at the position and number 2 at the position, I think safety is as big a gap as any position.
And I'm maybe warming up to there's a floor for Caleb Downs. What I mean by that is if you're looking at, okay, there's going to be some starting edges that go off the board before Caleb Downs. If I have to predict, teams are going to be drafting quarterbacks, edges, and there's probably going to be a couple wide receivers that go before Caleb Downs because you're going to get a starter at a premium position before you go for a starter at safety. You might even go for a starter running back before you go for a starter at safety, right? Like Jeremiah Love, right? Maybe. But I remember reading somebody did an article about when you draft a running back high, it's a really good floor pick because the running backs that are typically picked high, the Saquon Barkleys, the Bijan Robinsons, the Ashton Genties of the world, are significantly different than most of their contemporaries at the running back position. Right? There's a difference between Barkley and James Cook. Right, and one was taken
Mhm.
in the top 10 of a draft, and one was taken in round 2 of the draft. There's a difference. Both are great backs, but there's a difference. There's a Saquon Barkley difference there. So with safeties, I think it's also to the point that Taylor was just making, and that's, do you want to take Caleb Downs? It's going to be a safe pick of safety. You know you're getting somebody that's going to be able to start in your secondary for 7 to 10 years. Or do you want to take a risk and maybe that edge that you take, you're not sure if that edge has polished their game or that corner has some injury history? Is it better to take the safe pick in a non-premium position, or is it better to take a risk on a player because they're graded a little bit lower, but it's a more important position in the field? So, we're going to be having these discussions for the next 4 months.
Yeah.
But I think Taylor is right. I think, the gap between, let's say a lot of people agree with us, and you got Caleb and then you got Thieneman, right? It's certainly right. So on the edge position, Ruben Bain, right? I actually am treating Arvell Reese like more of an edge than a linebacker. Okay. So then you come in, there's still some people that are high on TJ Parker of Clemson. I'm not one of them, or Keldrick Falk, or, David Bailey, Cassius Howell, but that gap isn't as big as what we have on the safeties. Right. So it's an interesting exercise. And I'll go back to 2017 with the Jets when they took Jamal Adams. Actually, they didn't only take one safety. They took 2. They took Jamal Adams in round 1 and Marcus May in round 2. Was it a position of need? Sure. But, you had Deshaun Watson, you had Patrick Mahomes, but they didn't even, and whatever their evaluation was, and the way they make comments to the media after the fact, but they didn't feel the need to draft a quarterback because, we just brought back Ryan Fitzpatrick and we drafted Christian Hackenberg last year. We're okay. Oops. But they made the choice. And Jamal Adams, he was a good player. I mean, when they decided to move on, they got 2 first-round picks for him from Seattle. And then, unfortunately, the injury bug came. But, yeah, I don't know. I think, Taylor, when you said about the Jets picking Downs at number 7, I hope Jets Twitter isn't watching this because they're coming for you now. We are.
Well, I'm going to do a Caleb Downs going to the Jets mock draft just to.
Man, they are just so tired of the defense. But it's an interesting question. If Mendoza's the only quarterback coming out, or even let's say he's not. Let's say it's him and Oregon, Dante Moore. It's all this talk about the Jets trading up to the first pick. Okay, that's all well and good. If the Raiders have the first pick, the dream is over, right? It's done. Okay, so let's say the Jets win another game and they are, at 7, and Mendoza's gone, and maybe Cleveland takes Dante Moore. Ruben Bain is gone. Arvell Reese is gone. The Giants, let's say they take Carnell Tate, and Washington's ahead of the Jets, and instead of a defensive player like they should, they decide to go with Jordan Tyson. Well, what do the Jets do? Do you take Caleb Downs? Do you consider Mekhi Lemon? Dom and I floated the idea around of maybe even taking Kenyon Sadiq. It's a little high, but it's an explosive playmaker. So I don't know.
And Steve, everything you just explained is why I created the first round challenge in the simulator, because the entire algorithm is designed to make sure the players you want are going to be gone before you pick. So trying to see who are the best 5 options for a team in round 1, because sometimes you have to dig because teams are going to trade up ahead of you to get the guys that you like.
I think it's interesting too. Aaron Glenn's still going to be the coach in New York, right, Steve?
Oh yeah.
Guess who he drafted? when he was in Detroit, Brian Branch.
Brian Branch.
So, there you have to think safety. Safety's
I'll give you
another
one. I'll give you another one. Caleb Downs' uncle is former cornerback Dre Bly. Dre Bly is the defensive back coach for the Jets.
Yeah, they're gonna have 2 shots in the top 20. So you talked about floor. I just pulled up a fake mock here. You're looking at Commanders at 6, Jets at 7. I've seen a mock to the Rams at 9, so I'll throw them in there. Although I don't think they go that direction. Bengals at 10, Vikings at 11, Dolphins at 12. You want to talk about a team that needs a safety? The Chiefs underratedly need a safety. Nobody wants to talk about it because they have bigger needs. They have defensive tackle. But right now they're playing Shamari Connor as their safety, and he's kind of been getting torched. He's in the slot a lot, and they need someone. Ever since they lost
the guy to Tennessee, right?
Reed, what's his name?
Which one?
Reed. They lost him to
Justin Reed.
Justin Reed.
The Saints. They do not have a player
to make the argument ever since they let the Honey Badger go.
Well, that's but Justin Reed was good. Justin Reed was really good in that role. He led them to back-to-back Super Bowl. Justin Reed is a player that they are desperately missing in the back end of their defense right now. That's another spot I see a safety going.
We don't know what happens with McDuffie in the corner role. So it's a great point.
He's likely to get traded. So they could be going after corner. But again, the Cowboys need a safety at 15 right now. The Jets their second pick from Indy is at 18 and going down. The Jets could end up with 2 top 15 picks right now. We'll see what 44-year-old Phillip Rivers has to say about that. But in my opinion, right now, looking at this, his absolute floor is the Jets at 18, and I would not be surprised if it was the Cowboys at 15. I don't see him much further than that.
And there's a trade up. I'm going to use trade up logic. My logic for trading up is you never give up a day 2 pick to trade up in round 1. So you look at several of the trades that Buffalo has made to trade up. Buffalo gave up a 4th. And we were able to move up to get Dalton Kincaid. We gave up a 4th to pick Kare Elam. So
maybe they
Brandon
should keep
Beane will throw around 4th round picks pretty liberally.
Yeah, and that helps when you're in the back end, right? But you're not able to do that when you move from 17 to 13 or from 12 to 9. But when you move from 30 to 27 or 30 to 23, then you're able to get away with that some. So in Caleb Downs' range, that's just not going to be a possibility.
Yeah. So the team to look to trade down is the Commanders. The Commanders only have 3 picks in the first 5 rounds. They have a pick in rounds 1, 3, and 5.
Yeah. And they have a very old roster. So they need as many bites at the apple as they can get. Yeah.
Right. And they've mortgaged
likely to move up then. Let's say they pick 6. Let's say Mendoza, let's say Dante Moore goes back to school. Mendoza comes out. He's the only quarterback with a round 1 grade. Ruben Bain, Arvell Reese. Let's go David Bailey. And let's go.
So you have Bailey
one of the wide receivers or 2 of the wide receivers, no David Bailey, whatever you want to put. Those are the premium positions, wide receivers and edge rushers. Let's say a team really wants to get over the Jets because they know about Dre Bly. They know about Aaron Glenn drafting Brian Branch. They want to get ahead of the Jets at 7 to pick 6. What team could possibly trade up with the Commanders to go get a guy like Caleb Downs? Because the Vikings are kind of in a rebuild, right? So they're probably not moving picks up. The Dolphins probably in a rebuild, probably not trying to move.
I'm not so sure the Vikings don't consider Jeremiah Love instead.
No, I agree with you 100%.
So
I think the
San
only
Francisco has an incredible, and Philadelphia have incredible amounts of 3rd and 4th round draft capital. Doing mocks for those teams in rounds 3 and 4 is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Because you get to kind of pluck, hey, there's a top 100 player left at the end of round 3, or this 3rd round grade dropped around 4. Those are fun mocks to do from
it'd be interesting because both of those teams are loaded. Both of those teams have safeties. Like the Eagles drafted Makuba at the end of the 2nd round. This year, he's been playing really well. The 49ers drafted Marquise Siegel from K-State. He filled in for the first half of the season until Mustafa came back. So those 2 teams, it's interesting that those are the teams you call.
Steelers have a lot. Steelers accumulated a lot of, day 2, day 3, with the comp picks and everything. I'm trying to think of what their
They
secondary.
traded for Minka.
You know what?
No, they
Ramsey,
traded.
right?
No,
They
they
traded
traded
away
away Minka.
So you're right. That's another team.
And
That's
they
a team
made him.
that,
Yeah, that could be another one.
and with them,
I don't
picking,
know.
they wouldn't have to give up a ton. I mean, obviously to get to 6, that's a lot, but
That is a
So
lot. I'm
another
thinking
one.
the Bengals.
No. Okay, I got a good one. So
Okay.
Houston has 2 second-round picks.
They
Houston
need.
has if
I don't
the-
know how you don't come out of round 1 or 2 without an
Yeah, but their
interior offensive
coaches-
lineman.
Their coach is D'Amico Ryans. That's the
I
reason
know.
why I would say they could do that, right? He could say, my defense goes to another level, because if you think about it, like Houston's defense is up and coming, right? Like they gave
Like they're what,
Buffalo-
number 2 in the league right now,
Yeah.
behind the Broncos, something like that.
They
it might even be number 1.
they gave Buffalo major problems. That's a defense that I don't want to play in the playoffs, right?
Right.
It's Houston and Denver are the 2 defenses I don't want to play in the playoffs, right? So
It's hard right
Sometimes-
now for them, because do they really want to invest draft capital and moving up to replace a 3rd-round pick from last year? Like Kalen Bullock's their starting for like safety, and he's huge physical specimen, 6'3", almost 200 pounds. So like, are you going to give that up? Because Petrie's playing in the slot, right? So he's listed as safety, but he's playing in the slot. So then at that point, maybe he does find a way to fit in. But
So
it's
the reason that I said Houston is locked in my opinion, from a draft standpoint. They've done a really good job of adding star power, right? Because think of how they manipulated Stroud and Will Anderson in that draft, right?
Yeah.
They knew that they wanted to get stars. And if they believe Caleb Downs is going to be a star, screw the needs on the offensive line, go get Caleb Downs, and let's make this defense something the NFL has never seen before.
it would be crazy. Yeah.
It would.
Yep.
I'm also looking at the current order. I don't know. Maybe. Well, the Dolphins have Minka. They probably need more help on corner to get ahead of somebody than they do safety. Yeah, it's an interesting
They need a
exercise.
safety. I've talked to Eric Smith before, and I'm in a Dolphins
Mm-hmm.
Discord. They need a safety. They've needed a safety for a couple of years.
It's an interesting thing as we, wrap it up with the final. What do we got? 4 games, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, so why don't we pause for podcaster identification? Steve, do you want to let everybody know who you are and how they can find you?
Yeah. So my Twitter handle @Steve_NFL is there. Also reference the YouTube channel, the show I call Talk Tape and Turbines. The turbines relates to jet engines. So there's a lot of jet content, do a lot of side work with Taylor on each of our YouTube channels around the draft. And, now as we're ticking down, I'll be spewing a lot of, despite the fact that they lost the Big Ten, I'll be spewing a lot of pro Ohio State content as we get closer to, God willing, another national championship title. But yep. And you can find me here Thursdays, 7 p.m. Eastern. Cha.
Yep. You can find my content at footballwithchaw.com. And then my Twitter handle is right down here below. This is also pushed to not only my Football with Chaw YouTube, but also Steve's YouTube as well. So this is going into all 3 places, including the Draft Professors, which we're here on Thursday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern. For now, Jim.
Yeah, so I want to give a shout out to the Draft Professor Simulator. There is no other simulator out there like it. I have programmed it myself, designed it myself. There's a lot of things you can do in the Draft Professor Simulator that you can't do anywhere else. So there's a first round challenge, which is 5 unique 1-round mocks. You can do a second round challenge, which is 10 unique 2-round mocks. And the simulator will make sure you don't pick the same player in whichever round the challenge is. There's also something called fanatic mode. So if mock drafts get too easy for you, go find a fanatic mode podcast, shows you where the button is, explains how it works. You'll be hearing a lot about fanatic mode this draft cycle. I plan to take Taylor through a Denver one. I plan to take Steve through a Jets one. We'll do some one-off podcasts, but you can start to see how the functionality works. It's designed for podcasters. So if you are a podcaster, it gives you a chance on one podcast to talk about 8 different draft scenarios. If these 7 guys are off the board before we pick, who's the 8th best first round pick we can come up with? You have to begin to think like that, talk through those types of problems live on a podcast. Fanatic Mode was there last year, but we didn't really talk about it much. This year, you're going to be hearing way too much about Fanatic Mode. So you'll always hear me say, are you the fanatic that I'm looking for? If you like doing mock drafts, the Draft Professor Simulator is designed for the people that like doing a lot of mock drafts. So with that being said, for Taylor, Steve, myself, for the 110 people at the Draft Professor, thank you so much for tuning in. Enjoy your Thursday, and we will see you on a podcast again in 1 hour to discuss EJ's first round grades. Thank you, everybody.